Good afternoon to all of you. This is a video conference with my good friend Luis, also known as Cavalcante. We are here today to discuss a little bit about how important the English language is to pilots who want to fly abroad or are already living abroad and want to improve their abilities with the English language. First of all, Luis, can you give us a brief overview of your career in aviation, please?
For sure. So first of all, my name is Luis. A pleasure to be here with Daniel, and I'm more than happy to share my stories with all of you. And a brief overview of my career started back in 2011 when I started my private pilot's license here in Brazil. And right after that, I decided to go to the United States, where I did all my flight training in Daytona Beach, Florida, in Phoenix East Aviation School, and where I got my instrument rating, my multi-engine certification, and also my commercial pilot's license. And right after that, I came back to Brazil because the country was in a was uphill, and the career development was there was a pretty good gap here in Brazil. But by the time I arrived, that gap was over, so I had to go and started working in the general aviation as a flight dispatcher, in where I stayed for a year or so, and then I started flying charter, citation jet back then, for a while, for like 6 or 8 months or so. And right after that, I joined Azul, where I flew the ATR for 2.5 years approximately. And after that, I joined Avianca, where I met Daniel, and I flew there for another 2 years and 3 months or so. And after that, I went to Bamboo Airways in Vietnam, where I stayed, where I'm still am at the moment. And I've been flying for them for 1 year and 3 months. And due to the pandemic, I'm back here in Brazil.
That's amazing. That's a rocket career, and I'm sure you get all the credits for this because you're a very good professional. You're good in everything that you do. People that know you personally can attest to what I'm saying. And Luis, when did you realize how important the
Appreciate it.
English knowledge is for your career? When did you have this click? How important English can be for our career?
I could picture the moment. It was when I tried to do my first flight in Daytona Beach, and I've only flown visual here in Brazil for the private pilot course. And when I was there for my instrument rating, first time I contact them to get the clearance, the IFR clearance, I know, like, damn, this is important. Say again. I don't know how many. I lost count of how many times I had to tell them to say it again, and it took a while. But I was fortunate enough to have studied English during my entire life. So I started when I was a kid, and that helped me out a lot. But the technical English was fundamental, and I was missing it. So uh, at that point, I realized, like, I lost time, and I could have used my time in a better way to make my life much easier
Nice.
right now. So I kind of wasted a few hours just trying to figure out how to speak on the radio and how to talk to everyone, what to expect, and everything.
That's nice. Yeah, I had the same feeling when I went to the United States. My very first flight was before I joined the flight school. A friend of mine took me flight with him on a Cessna 172 at night
Yeah.
in Lauderdale area, and they have special VFR clearance. So even on a
Yep.
VFR flight, you call clearance and it gets you a squawk number and everything. And
Yep.
it was so different to talk on the radio in English than it is to talk plain English with somebody at the cafeteria or something like this. It's
Definitely.
yes, it was shocking to me. And after that, I started to study English for real, not only watching movies, but to study. What about you? How did you learn
Yep.
English?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have started learning English in a young age, and I learned it in the traditional way. So going to the English school as a kid, and then I was also fortunate enough to be able to perform an educational exchange to Germany, where I learned a little bit of German, but the main language was English. So that was another shock as well, because that was the first time that I have experienced an European speaking English with a Brazilian. So that was the first time that I met two different nationalities with two different backgrounds, two different accents, speaking one common language. So it's extremely hard. And there was also another click where, like, oh goddamn, they're unable to pronounce it's pronounce or something like that. So you have to adjust your hearing, sorry.
Yes.
And that's fundamental. So that was how I basically learned English.
Great, great. Let's change subject a little bit. What were the main motivations behind your decision to fly abroad? We know that we had that crisis with Avianca Brazil, and we all lost our jobs here back then. But before that, I knew that you already wanted to fly overseas. So, what
Yeah.
were the main reasons?
Well, the first reason is that I've always wanted to work for a well-structured company. So I always, my desire was to work hard and be able to join one of the big companies in the world. And I also wanted to get a fair salary back. So this is something that we're kind of missing here in Brazil.
Yes.
So that was the main goal, is to fly in a well-structured company, and also to get a fair pay.
Nice. And how do you prepare for the assessments, for the screenings?
Uh, I would say that I haven't done any short-term preparation. I would say that I've been developing throughout my career this preparation, and so always like reading everything in English, just writing notes in English, writing summaries in English, and practicing at the most the English. But what I did as a training, a short-term training for the assessment, is to prepare by reading some specific books, like the ACE, the technical pilot interview, and also watching a few videos which would contain um, aviation subjects that were important for the screening process.
That's amazing. Do you think that an online platform or maybe some interview practice video calls would have helped you?
Definitely, because one thing is to talk someone face to face. So as right now we are talking through the video, so there's like this lag. So sometimes you cannot hear the word precisely, and we're both Brazilian, so our accent is pretty much the same.
Yes.
But when you add the difference, the cultural difference, the accent, the background, it's something completely different. So it's a huge obstacle on the assessment. So it would be very good to have that kind of support. But back then it was kind of like that I figured out the assessment. It was very, very quick. So there was really no time to prepare, to be honest. But it's extremely helpful. I wish I had the chance, and definitely for my next objectives, I'll do something like this because it's important.
Great. Actually, that was my next question. I was going to ask you how was it to fly in a multicultural environment? You already said how it is. And so I'd like to ask if you had any type of problem during the interview, the simulator, the flight training, or on an actual flight because of two non-native speakers sharing the same environment and talking about the same subject. How was it? Did you have any difficulties with that?
Um, Between non-native speakers and me, I had a few problems with it, and I'll mention it in a second. I just would like to come back to the previous question, because we were talking about these obstacles, and right now during our conversation I couldn't hear you very well. The video was lagging. So this is like how important it is. This may happen during your interview. So because of my English knowledge, and because of my experience that I've already experienced, I was able to distinguish what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that you may face on your online assessment. So that's another reason why you should go ahead and start doing some preparation like these. But answering the last question, I had a few problems with non-native speakers. So some of them you may think it was like a CRM problem or something like that, and I guess it was. But it also included this problem with this miscommunication with
Mm-hmm.
non-native speakers. So one example, quick example, we are a pilot, so everyone will understand. So we were climbing out of Hanoi, and it was my first flight on the instruction. I was already a type rated first officer on the A320, so no big deal, right? And we were climbing out of Hanoi, and the ATC just gave us a restriction to maintain for level 240, 260 or something like that. And I had my navigation display set to the range of 40 nautical miles. And my instructor, it was the first time they were flying. He didn't know my background or anything or whatsoever. So it's kind of complicated to be an instructor in that position too, right? So he doesn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to judge his behavior, but the way that he communicated wasn't proper, I would say. So instead of saying like, hey, we have a traffic, 12 o'clock, it's like still 35 miles out, he just screamed, traffic, traffic. And my mistake, sorry. He said, TCAS. And I said, what? TCAS? And TCAS is a memory item on the Airbus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm sorry, Captain, I don't understand. And I had the traffic inside, but TCAS is something else, right?
Yes.
And he pointed to the ND and said, TCAS. And I said, okay, he's trying to say traffic and not TCAS.
Yes.
They're two completely different situations.
Yes.
And this was a good example of like miscommunication. And I'm sure he didn't mean any harm, but it was a miscommunication. But it's good to have this English knowledge to be able to distinguish what is what.
Yeah.
And I also had another experience in the beginning of the flight, and because everyone will notice that different nationalities won't be able to pronounce that clearly a few words or syllables or something like that. So he asked for the blue book, which was a blue covered book with the training records.
Mm-hmm.
And back then he pronounced this bubuk. And I thought, bubuk, I misheard and I gave him the logbook, and it wasn't clear for me what he was asking. And but after that, I understood that bubuk meant blue book. So this is like another example, but these are all things that you have to consider, because you will need to adapt your hearing to their pronunciation and so on and so forth. And it happens the same way for them. So
Absolutely. And Luis, if you could share with us some information about the international flights. I myself, I have two experiences with being very shocked by how people were talking on the radio. My very first international flight was to England, out of the United States to UK, to London.
yeah.
And it was the first time I had to adapt my hearing to a different accent, which is not an accent, because British, they speak English, they don't
Yeah.
have an accent, right? But for me, it was different. It took me a very long time to be able to respond correctly. And the second time this happened to me, it was last year. The first time I went to Delhi, and the Indians, most of them think that they can speak English just like the Queen, so they speak really fast, and it was really hard to understand especially what other pilots were talking on the radio. And do you have another place that you can say some other experience you can share about this?
Well, I would be able to say two experiences maybe. I would be able to mention two. One of them is there is an FIR in China, which is called Sanya FIR. It's right between Vietnam wherever you go along on the way to Taiwan or South Korea, Japan, or you name it. And you have to cross that FIR, and by the time you call them, the communication is extremely bad. I mean, you quite can't hear them, and their English is pretty basic. They're just there to say bamboo, whatever, identified, climb maintain 310, and then they transfer you to another controller. But I was getting used to that flight, and I didn't think that it was a problem anymore until I've flown into that FIR, and the controller was trying to tell me that there was an unidentified aircraft that was 500 feet above us, flying within the Sonia FIR. And that was quite a challenge because I could see it on my ND, 1,500 feet above us. And it was an unidentified aircraft. And it was kind of following the aircrafts on the track. And after we landed and we discussed and we did a small research, we found out that it was like American aircraft that used to fly in that region. There is something called, I just missed the name of it. It's something that China is building a few airports, like military airports in a few coral reefs. So they're just pumping sand and building airports. So that is kind of like international waters. Okay. So that's why China doesn't do anything on that region, because they wouldn't have the support. It's like a territory fight. And it was an American 707. We could see him like in distance. We could recognize it was 707 because it was quite close. It was following us like 2.5 miles out on our right side. And it kept following the aircrafts on the way and back and so on. It's like a sci-fi situation, but the Mission Impossible movie. But it's true. If you don't trust me, I'm sorry. And but it was quite an experience. But especially with that English, it became like so much harder. And another situation was in a city called Cheongju in South Korea. It's like 50 miles south of Seoul. And we were there to get our clearance. And we knew that the ATC was a big issue. And we just simply couldn't understand the ATC clearance. I mean, it was impossible to understand. There were 2 Vietnam Airlines aircraft on the ground at the same time. And one of them was an English captain. And the captain of my flight knew him because they used to fly in the same company before. Mm-hmm. And we had to translate to each other kind of like what was the clearance all about. Wow. And in the end, the clearance came out as fly runway heading, climb 5,000. That was the clearance. So that was like how difficult it was to set up the communication with them.
Wow, simple like this, and people had to discuss to be able to find out what was the controller intention.
Yeah, I mean, they were actually trying to give us like an SID or something like that, but it was just unable to understand. We were unable to understand. It was impossible to. First, the radio transmission was poor. Mm-hmm. And it was impossible because they were pronouncing, can you imagine, like the name of a VOR in Korean? It's complicated, right? So the language barrier was huge. So we had to manage that situation, and the way out of it was a simple clearance, like fly around ahead and climb 5,000. That was it.
Nice. Luis, of course, your English is in a very high level. And even though you speak such a good English, you had difficulties when facing this challenge of flying abroad and preparing for an interview and dealing with different accents, non-native speakers sharing the same environment and things like this. And this just come to show us how important it is to keep practicing, keep studying, definitely trying to make our ears and our tongues sharper than they were before, and how much this can add up to our careers at the first stage, just to make us feel comfortable when dealing with this situation. Like, okay, I know where I stand, I know how good my English is, so let's deal with this, right?
Definitely. It's extremely important. And just by being in Brazil for the last couple of months, I can see that my English is having like a slightly downgrade.
Yeah.
So if you don't keep pushing, it's gonna get worse and worse.
Yes.
And I had an experience when I lived in the US. I came back like after 8 months or so, and then I stayed quite a while without speaking English in a regular,
Yeah.
uh, not speaking English very often. So I realized like how quickly your English can downgrade if you don't keep
Yes.
practicing.
It's really hard to improve, but it deteriorates really fast if you don't practice,
Really
especially
fast.
for us that we are not native speakers, so it's not our first language, so we have to keep practicing. Especially for us
Definitely,
as pilots, we use it every day, so the better our English, the better professionals we are, right?
definitely. It's going to make a huge difference whenever the market recovers as well.
Oh, yes.
The whenever the market recovers, trust me, they're going to be picky on every single aspect that they can. So the better you prepare, the faster you recover. So the faster you'll be able to set yourself up in the market. So
Luis, thank you very much for your time. It was great talking to you. Let's have this
pleasure, my friend.
conversation more often. It was really pleasant.
Yeah, definitely, my friend.
Take care, my friend. The best to you.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.